Give us a call. All right. Hello, Cleveland. Cleveland, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, Martin?
Good. How are you?
Good. Big fan. Also have a short position in quantum. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. Yeah, I'm not a hater. I'm not calling to hate, but I did have a question regarding general investing. And I know in the past you had mentioned that you don't recommend the average person to get into investing and that most people don't have the ability to be good investors. And my question to you is, as a young professional recently getting into the corporate world, started making a salary, just kind of curious what you would recommend someone like me to do as far as, gaining access to wealth. And I know salary is important, but for someone in my position who, is probably going to be on a salary for the next 30 years of my life, what would you recommend?
Well, I mean, you want to get rich like everybody else, but you need some reason why, the world should give you a huge amount of money. And the world is, pretty efficient at parsing out huge amounts of money. And you either have to have some great skill or you have to have ownership in something that rises dramatically in value. And, the stock market's kind of the worst way to do that because the stock market doesn't rise dramatically in value, and the price that you get the ownership of is very, very high usually. So if you're good at something, you can convince somebody to start a company and raise investor funds and get 1 or 2% of a company. And if that company becomes successful, you'll be wealthy. If you are an executive and you get a higher and higher salary over time, you can become wealthy that way. But trying to turn a small amount of money into a large amount of money in the stock market just is extremely unlikely and will probably hurt more than it helps. So even professionals have a really hard time with the market. The best firms in the world, like Citadel and Millennium and so forth, they make 10 or 20% a year. So if you plug in that 10 or 20% a year into your money, and that's good, then you can try to become a professional investor, but it's very difficult. If you need way more returns, like 50 or 100 or 500% returns for your plan to work, well, you're certainly not going to get that in the stock market safely, at least. So to me, I would just focus on your career and just try to get your career up and running. Anyway, that's all I got. Adam, I appreciate you calling in. We got 2 people in the queue. I guess we can talk to this guy. What's up?
Hello, hey.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm just calling in just because I feel like the big data craze hasn't really ended, although people have kind of like moved past it in the media. I still think that big data is a huge bottleneck for these artificial intelligence algorithms, and I think that Google is actually a really big key player.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at their video model they released the other day, it's pretty obvious that they trained off YouTube, and
Yeah.
they have a huge amount of data that is sort of data is sort of the new gold, but how to monetize it exactly we don't know. But I would agree with you that Google's sort of showing off their skills in AI, and they obviously kind of half invented the space. So it's pretty exciting. Thanks for calling. Let's see what this guy has to say. Hello.
Martin,
What's up, man?
how you doing, brother?
Good. How are you?
I could be better. Could be worse.
Yeah.
Hey man, I just wanted to talk about the short position you have right now.
Okay.
So, I think you could be completely right. Everything you've ever said about it, you could be completely right. Yeah. This stock could still go to 50, and you have no defense.
Do you think
against
I'm
it.
like brand new to investing? Are you telling me something I don't know? You think I've never been in a short position before?
The way you're acting is making it seem like that? Yeah.
Really? What were you doing when you were
Yeah.
17?
Excuse me?
What were you doing when you were 17?
I'm sure a lot less than you. What were you doing?
No, tell me the answer. Don't be smart ass.
No, I'm asking. What were you doing?
I'm asking you a question, not the other way around. What were you doing at 17?
Working at a restaurant.
Uh-huh. And how old are you now, sir?
22.
I see.
How old are you?
Before you give grown men advice, why don't you grow up a little bit yourself? Fucking give a grown man advice. I'm a grown-ass man.
Brother,
I'm a grown-ass man. Fucking 22 years old. You're probably still working at the restaurant. Trying to give me advice? Homie, I wouldn't hire you to lick my dog's balls, let alone mine. I'm very exclusive with my dog ball lickers. You wouldn't make the cut. I'd be interviewing a lot of people and you next. I'm a grown ass man. I see you haters. I see you haters having fun. That's cool. I got something for you. Don't worry. What's up, Nick?
Hey, Martin, how's it going?
Good.
Hey, so I was calling in reference to a specific stock in the mining industry. I'm not going to say it until you give me permission.
You can say it. I just don't know. I don't know mining.
What'd you say?
You can say whatever you want, but I don't know mining, man. What do I know about mining? Metals.
That's fair enough. But
Talking about metals or Bitcoin?
yeah, rare earth metals specifically.
Oh, is this
company's
the one
called
you want to watch? TMC? Yeah, you've been asking about this. I just don't know anything about it. I know it's been going up, but I do think this is like a meme zone. It's it was sort of a micro cap. It's covered by Wedbush and H.C. Wainwright and AGP, all the standard kind of like pipe guys, and 47 employees. I don't know. It seems like a meme stock to me.
Well, they do a lot of contract work. A lot of contract.
I don't know. Maybe. It could work. I just don't know. It seems, I'm a little skeptical, but I'll look at it someday when I have more time. I appreciate it.
All right, fair enough. Have a good.
You too, buddy. Okay, we got another quantum guy here. What's up, Andrew?
Hey, what's up, Martin? How you doing?
What's up, man?
I got hammered on the IonQ stuff that I opened up this morning, but my thought, and I wanted your thought, I guess, is what I'm really asking on. This is a bubble bursting. Is this a short coverage situation where everything's just pumping so hard because everyone knows it's bullshit, or what are we really, what is the reality here? These are nothing companies with a 20-plus year technology out. We're sitting on AI technology that's being built, and then the next step is, the fission stuff and whatever, but that's still 5 years out to 10 years out. What the fuck are we looking at?
Yeah. I think it's important to always remember that a stock is just a 4-letter financial instrument that doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to correspond to reality. It doesn't have to be something useful or not useful. And I remember the dot-com bubble where there were companies that their products didn't work. They were barely companies. They were just set up. They were literally set up just to take advantage of the dot-com bubble.
Right? Yeah.
So, if you keep that perspective, it sort of helps you in some ways and hurts you in others. It helps you realize that there are companies in the market that are truly worthless, and they're there to help executives do stock sales. If you look at like somebody like the CEO of D-Wave, there's more money than the guy could make in 100 lifetimes. The guy's putting together $15 million. It's, he's worked years for this, and this is his payday. But for the rest of us, we started looking at this like, I would never make my career in quantum computing for obvious reasons. A lot of people have tried and failed, but this guy kind of got lucky. I was talking to a quantum computing company that went bankrupt just before Google Willow. And I was actually considering buying them out and taking them public again, because they're actually publicly traded, but they went bankrupt. And D-Wave was going to go bankrupt. But the Willow bubble happened, and the stock went up, and now Barrett's, or whatever his name is, gets to sell all of his stock and, try to pump it up further and get more stock grants and sell that. But the reality is, the stock market for him is an liquidity exit tool, right?
Yeah.
That's the function it's serving for him is, how do I, put input, the input to the machine is pump, and the output is personal money for me. And whatever I have to do to get the pump going, I'll do it. And, part of it is, piggybacking off of, the NVIDIA and Google, various news drips and drabs that come out about quantum. Part of it is capitalizing timing-wise on a huge sea of liquidity in a bubble. But,
Right,
it's...
like it Microsoft getting a new state of matter quantum chip going, and now they're writing that way, it seems like, and there's just like all sorts of little, tweaky bullshit things that are just kind of flowing out of those places.
Yeah, longs, like a lot of people who are longs in retail, like they'll literally do stuff like Google, what is a good stock to buy or something. Or like they'll go to Barron's.com or Yahoo Finance and they'll just look at what's made the news and they'll buy whatever stock is on their screen. Like they'll read 2 or 3 articles. They'll be like, okay, I'm busy. I have to go back to my day job. What's going on out there? Imagine if you're a dentist or something. And
well, it's crazy to say that because
Nope.
I'm in the industry. I'm an advisor in my family. My dad's an advisor. He had clients in January talking about, oh, do we get into Rigetti and do we do this and that? And we're talking about people that have just sold businesses for $25, $30 million.
Right.
And they're even talking about it. It's like, what the, like, where is the rationality anymore? There is none, obviously. But how and why is the perception such? I guess.
well, I think if you
what do we do?
if you have liquidity, you tend to want to gamble with it. Even people who have sold businesses or whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's kind of like human nature. And if you go to Yahoo Finance, I'm sure you can find an article about quantum on there pretty much every day for the last month or two. And you look at it and you don't know any better. And you basically say, this sounds cool. This sounds like the future of computing. And,
Right.
AI,
quote unquote. Yeah.
Sure. And I missed NVIDIA or I missed AI. So let me get this thing. And,
Right.
I think what quantum really tells you is nothing about quantum computing. And it tells you everything about liquidity. Because I can show you a chart of Fartcoin and superimpose it with Rigetti, and you would not be able to tell the difference. All that you would be able to tell is that there's been a lot of people interested in revaluing this company very quickly, and nothing has changed in the value of Rigetti at all. I mean, the CEO has literally told you that. Nothing has changed in the value of Rigetti, but it went from 1 to 13. And certainly nothing's changed in the value of Fartcoin because it has no value. So it's just a question of how much people have free capital and they're willing to speculate. So these stocks are more barometers and mirrors of reality than they are reflecting any kind of business fundamentals or something like that. And shorting plays a small role in both liquidity and alpha. Normally, short sellers add to alpha by arbitraging prices. So they try to push expensive stocks down. They don't try, actually. They just happen to do it because they're selling. Yeah. And if anything, shorts kind of don't want to have any market impact like any other market participant. And so by shorting, they tend to normalize prices. But in this case, in the current environment, shorting is kind of, very carefully done. And, short capitulation does happen. It tends to be transitory. But I think usually when something's a quote unquote short squeeze, it's mostly a long squeeze. Longs get greedy, and longs get they start to sort of have this self-realization where they're look at GameStop. I mean, the reason GameStop was able to go to 400 or whatever it went to was that the longs temporarily at least said, I'm not going to sell. Then they, of course, decided to all sell together, partially because a falling price got some of them scared. And, the same thing will happen here, but it's just one of these things where it's a psychological question of musical chairs. And right now the music is playing, so no reason to go sit down in your chair when the party's up. But when the music stops playing, whether that's a bad GDP number or a rough earnings season or whatever, could just be 6 months goes by, a year goes by with no quantum computing innovation, right? We haven't seen any new quantum computers from IBM, and they promised bigger quantum computers and higher fidelity quantum computers. Nothing's happened. We've also been promised that from IonQ, and nothing's happened. So the state of quantum computing is not very different from it was a year ago. And if another 6 months goes by and we're still dealing with 100 qubit quantum computers with no logical qubits and poor gate fidelity, you would think people would get bored or move on to something else. Somebody mentioned rare earth mining. That excited some people, but not nearly enough as quantum computing. Some other people are interested in nuclear. Some people are interested in, there's always, Kramer used to say on his TV show, I never heard him say this in real life, but he used to say, there's always a bull market somewhere. Have you heard that? Him say that? And it's sort of like the average retail investor, ill-informed retail investor, is looking for that bull market somewhere because, they want the eye-popping return, and chasing whatever, bull market may be around is kind of what they're up to. And that's sort of the nature, of what, the average speculator is doing.
Yeah. Do you think some of these Fed auction tails that are going to be absolutely batshit crazy in the near future are going to have be maybe hopefully the starting point, and at least I'm saying hopefully for our sake we'll call it, be the starting point of liquidity exit because this would be the first place you dump? Or do you think you're going to have bag holders like you were talking about earlier, just sitting along the ride forever, all the way down?
Yeah, most
institutions will be dumping whatever they've got going on with this, right?
Yeah, there's no institutions in these stocks other than the market makers that are forced to buy the stock when they're short the calls. So, and I've even talked to a few of those market makers in the last few days, and there's no desire on their part to be involved in any of these stocks other than for the arbitrage of those trades. So to me, I do think most of the retail long investors will hold the bag at the top, but a few smart investors will sell and say, what, I made my double, I made my 2x, 3x, whatever, and I'm out, and they're the smarter investors of the bunch. But I think a lot of people who get into these stocks, they don't just want the next NVIDIA, they need the next NVIDIA. Because they have,
yeah.
well, they only have, $1,000 or $5,000 in the investment. So it's not going to make them rich unless it goes up 1,000x. It might take care of a few bills, but it's not going to make them rich. And, I'm sure there's some people out there with 50,000 or 100,000, in the stock. But, even then, I mean, the more money in the stock, generally, the more people are willing to sell because, if you actually do have $1 million in this stock, you're sitting there thinking about locking in your gain. Now, some people ride it all the way back down, but I think the more capital you have, the more likely you are to sort of sell and get out. But very few, people are actually going to hold it very few people are going to sort of time it well. I think most people who buy these stocks, again, they're hoping and thinking they will get 1,000x out of it. And people who bought the cannabis stocks did that. People who bought the self-driving car stocks did that. People who bought the weed stocks did that. I'm sorry, I said that one already. The 3D printing stocks, the .com stocks. There are people who are long eToys and like other garbage .coms, and they thought that on the way up, they were like, I'm never selling this. This is the future. And they were wrong. Like 3 or 4 companies have been like that over time. You know, Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, you know who they are, but the vast majority of stocks have never done that and never will do that. So you're sort of gambling that this is a 1 in 20,000 chance that you're going to be, you know, vindicated and get, you know, a 10x, 100x, 1000x, which, you know, is just so unlikely. And in this case, you know, practically zero chance.
Do you think there's like rogue hedge funds, or not rogue, but just hedge funds that are maybe not as well known that are playing this game because they can see that perception that's going on?
I don't think so. I'm going to let you go now. Thank you for calling. I don't think so with respect for like somebody who would go long the stock because there's a lot of momentum and ride the wave. There are people who do that. They generally don't stick around and they don't do it with huge positions. They'll do it in a more distributed way. So like quant funds are long momentum generally. And so, you know, there tends to be like a momentum. Just trying to find some interesting callers. But even momentum longs tend to get out. Yeah, I don't see too many exciting callers, so I'm going to shut the line down. This was fun. I have to do some real work, unfortunately. Thank you for calling, though.